From the Times and the Sunday Times, this is The Story. I'm Manveen Rana. Most parents want their kids to do well, to be happy. So in many ways, this man from the Netherlands should be perfectly normal.
They are coming now to visit me and I'm very proud. They're very beautiful children, doing very good at school. They are happy.
But what isn't so normal is that he didn't know he had any children. And now he has 50 of them, with mothers he's never met, somewhere out there in the world.
But it is quite a lot.
Nico is one of many men who donated sperm in the Netherlands anonymously and have now learnt that the clinics were ignoring the guidelines and selling the sperm on to legions of women. Nico has unwittingly spawned an entire tribe of children.
It is playing with life. And that is absolutely forbidden.
What happens when these children meet? What if they fall in love with each other without realising they're siblings? And what are the ethics of allowing some men to have tens or even hundreds of children carrying their DNA into the future? After all, it's what some tech titans have been trying to achieve for years.
If people don't have more children, civilization is going to crumble. Mark my words.
Is this why you have so many children?
I'm trying to set a good example.
The story today: the man with 50 children and no family.
My name's Senay Boztas. I'm a freelance journalist based in the Netherlands.
Senay, you've written this remarkable story about a man named Nico. Just tell us a bit about him. Where did you first meet him and what were your first impressions of this man?
I first met him through a support group for men who have donated sperm to have donor children. He's a very sweet man. He lives on his own in a really pretty seaside town in the Netherlands called Getty, in his parents' old house. He doesn't have a family of his own. He said his life just didn't really go that way, and he didn't have a relationship that he thought would go towards marriage. He's from a very religious community as well, and he said that he didn't want to have marriage and kids himself. That wasn't something he saw for himself. He used to work in IT. He said he travelled a lot, and now he's not working, sort of looking forward to retirement.
How old is he?
He is 63. He has some mobility issues at the moment, so sort of struggling a little bit with his leg. So slowed down a bit.
Just explain what's happened to him.
Nico donated for about 2 years, from 1998. At the time he was a student in Leiden. He'd seen a leaflet in the library calling out for sperm donors, and at the time he was in his late 30s. He just thought it would be a good thing to do, to donate for science, for embryo research. It wasn't something that he was paid to do beyond a very small amount of travel expenses in guilders, which were worth very little at the time. So he spent a couple of years donating and didn't think too much more of it. And then there was a change in the law to say that donors could no longer be anonymous. He didn't need to be an anonymous donor anyway. He said he was happy with being recognised. But when that law changed, he was called back to the clinic to be informed about this. And they said, oh, by the way, you've actually got about 30 children.
30.
And he thought, oh, okay, 30 children. And then through the years, there were a number of concerning signals about fertility clinics in the Netherlands and things that weren't going on according to medical guidelines. And about 10 years later, so still about a decade ago, he got in touch with the clinic and asked in a bit more of a pressing way, how many children do I have then? And he finally got an answer verbally, he said, that he had 25 in the Netherlands and 25 abroad.
Wow, 50 children for a man who's never had a family of his own. I mean, that is extraordinary. How did he adjust to understanding that fact?
He didn't go public with it at the time. He said that his parents were still alive and he felt that it wouldn't be something that would be a good thing to share with them. But obviously he was shocked and he thought that this wasn't how it should go. He was someone who, in his view, was doing something good. He didn't have some kind of crazy messiah complex that he wanted to spread his seed as far as and wide as it could go. No, he was responding to a call to help people who he felt were having fertility problems and that he might be able to do something to assist them.
Senay, when he actually gave the donation, back then, as you say, you could be anonymous doing it. That has changed. Has he met any of these 50 children?
Yes, he has. Now the law is that when they turn 16, they can request the details of the donor. They don't have to, but if they do, then they can reach out. And he described one meeting that he'd had with a young girl at a kind of intermediary organisation in Bos in the Netherlands. And he said that was quite an awkward situation, an awkward conversation. But in the process of it, he did make a video that could be shown to donor children so they could find out a bit more about him and about his family's history. And he said after that, he preferred that if someone wanted to meet him, they could just come and see him at his place in his seaside town.
Wow. It must be such a bizarre situation to find yourself in, and not something he ever expected to happen. How does Nico feel about what ending up with 50 children?
He feels it's outrageous. He feels that he's been betrayed, and he described it to me as a very intimate theft. If you had to say how you felt about it all in English.
Very disappointed.
Yeah.
There's no other words for it. It is theft of something that's very intimate.
And when you first met your children, when you first heard that you had so many, how did that feel?
Surprised. They are coming now to visit me, and I'm very proud.
Yeah.
They're very beautiful children, doing very good at school. They all are in very good families. They are happy, so that's the positive. But it is quite a lot. It is playing with life, and that is absolutely forbidden. You must respect life at all costs.
Oh man, it's a terrible situation to suddenly find yourself in. And we should say, Nico isn't the only one in the Netherlands to have a huge number of children. Senay, you've talked to a number of donors. How did they feel about realising that they had so many children?
Funnily enough, the other donors that I spoke to were very modest and they said, oh, no, I didn't breach the limit. But then it turned out that when they said I didn't breach the limit, that meant that they had 21 children, for example, which is still quite a lot of children.
By any normal standard.
One of the men I spoke to, he was actually very angry that he was first informed by the clinic that he had 20 children and then it turned out to be 21. And he said, this is another life. This is another person. This isn't just a number. He is very, very angry. And there are questions about informed consent. There are questions about medical malpractice. Is there damage caused to people? Well, it depends to what extent they're expected to have an influence in the donor-conceived children's lives. The lawyer I spoke to, Mark de Heck, who's been talking to some of these people, he sort of made a joke. Yeah, you could be at a birthday party every weekend if you've got 50 kids. But actually, it's not a joke.
Quite the responsibility.
Yeah, but it's also not a joke if you're wanting to have a role in people's lives, if they want you to have a role in their lives, if they have questions they want you to answer, and if you did turn out to have some kind of genetic condition or sickness, this is not a small matter.
And how many other super donors are there in the Netherlands?
There are 85.
Wow. How many children between them?
We've only got details of sort of broad bands, so the number of men with between 40 and 50, or 50 and 75, or 100 and 125. So in order to be a super donor, they've each got to have more than 25, more than the recommended limit.
Wow. 85 men, entire dynasties.
Yeah, and what is even more striking is that they didn't know how many there were until this April, when MPs realised that when the Dutch finally put their limit into law this year, this April. So some MPs asked some questions and said, well, how many are there then? And this emerged in parliamentary answers to the questions that there were 85 mass donors in the Netherlands who have more than the medically recommended number of children, and not because of their own wish and not to their own financial benefit.
That's extraordinary. And Senay, you've told us a bit about these super donors, the men who have 25 children or more, some of them unwittingly, like Nico, who didn't realise that the clinics were using his sperm again and again and again. Others, though, seem to have gone about it almost deliberately. I mean, Times Radio heard from Jonathan Jacob Meyer, a man who is estimated to have at least 550 children. Seems to have set about it almost on purpose, and he's unapologetic about it now.
I've never donated to do something for myself. Of course, it's great to be helpful towards people, and the gratefulness that you receive is really, it's a miracle to receive that kind of gratefulness. You know, I spent maybe in those 16 years, maybe 50,000 hours of my life in helping them with realizing such a beautiful dream. And, you know, you have to see it in perspective, in my opinion. To be angry or even hateful, as some of the parents became, that's to me a little bit out of line, in my opinion.
So he is a donor whose story has been made into a Netflix docu-series and gotten a lot of views around the world. A man with 1,000 kids, something of an exaggeration in the title. But he's somebody who has no problem with the idea of having a lot of children and has given sperm to a lot of people in a lot of countries, and also runs a YouTube channel, social media channels talking about it. But this has not been uncontroversial in the Netherlands.
You know, it's just like people always have these first reactions, first response, but they don't know me. They don't know the way I am as a donor, that I keep in contact with the children, with the parents, that I visit them yearly. For me, they're not a number, the children. I really love them. They are unique human beings. They're unique souls. And but I must say I'm blessed with all the goodness that I received from the children and the parents over the years.
In fact, there have been 2 court cases against him. One asking him to stop donating sperm because the children don't want endless numbers of half-brothers and half-sisters all around the world, and they feel that they have a right to ask him to abide by the rules which generally apply in different countries. And so a Dutch court has ruled to ask him to stop.
Wow.
But a Dutch court only has jurisdiction over its own boundaries, of course.
What are the rules around donation?
When these kinds of techniques were being invented to help people with infertility, sperm donations, at the start there were a lot of burgeoning fertility clinics, and it was all a bit of a Wild West, and record keeping was very sketchy in all sorts of countries, including the UK. In the Netherlands, there was a guideline that was drawn up about how many children would be the maximum, really, considering that these are small societies. And they came up with this guideline of 25 children per donor, which was given to the clinics. And it wasn't a law. It hasn't yet been tested in court to what extent breaching this guideline might be considered unlawful.
That's so interesting. And just explain why those guidelines have been put in place. What's the thinking behind them?
There are a number of things. Number one is they test people who give sperm donations for all kinds of diseases. You don't test for everything because you don't know about everything at the time of the donation. Nico actually described having a sort of waiting period with his own donation because AIDS was very big at the time.
Of course.
And so there was a protocol around that. So one thing is, if someone does have certain genetic patterns or whatever, you may not want to pass that on to too many of your population if there was some kind of problem. So it's to limit that risk. And it's also to limit the risk of a half-brother and half-sister meeting and getting into a relationship together unknowingly.
Ah, Yes, well, we'll come on to that in a moment. Before we do though, so what are the rules in other countries?
In Britain, for example, they drew it up properly. So the law that came into action in 1991 was that you could have 10 mothers. And interestingly, they didn't just look at the number of children, they looked at the number of mothers, because if someone has a successful pregnancy through a donation, it might be that they would want a second child and would choose to use the same donor to have a kind of sense of family and the same genes in the family.
Tell us about one of these super donors who actually ran a fertility clinic and directly profited from his donations.
The first case that emerged in the Netherlands that made people realise that things weren't going exactly according to plan or medical guidelines was the case of Jan Karbaat, who was a fertility doctor himself. And it turned out that, well, first his clinic was shut down by the Dutch inspectorate around 2009 because they suspected that things weren't quite going to plan and donor registrations weren't quite what they should be. And then it emerged that he had been using his own donations multiple times and is thought to have fathered, estimates range maybe up to even 200 children of his own.
A podcast on the Karbaat case by the journalist Jenny Kleeman managed to track down a woman named Lydia, whose son Peter had been born as a result of a sperm donation from the Karbaat clinic. And Peter had quite the shock when he tried to find out more about his biological father.
He called me and he was crying. I said, what's the problem? He said, Mom, mijn donor is Karbaat. I hear it and I think, oh my God. No, everyone is okay, but not Karbaat. I was in shock, I'm crying.
When things were coming out about the clinic, there were various reports in papers, and I do remember seeing a quote of one mother remembering that he said, I'll just go and get some fresh seed. And she didn't realise quite how fresh it would be.
Oh.
There's nothing like Dutch. I mean, they say it straight anyway, but Dutch is a very direct language.
There's no hiding. There's
no.
no. Gosh. How was he found out? How did they work out what had been happening?
Funnily enough, it was a technological thing. It became so easy and cheap to test your own DNA, and this became something that people started to do. You can just get a kit sent to your house and test to what extent you're from a far-flung country, but they can also match you with people who have a similar genetic pattern to you. And this was where some people were realising, well, hold on a minute, I seem to have quite a lot of people who seem to have quite a large match with me. And I'm a donor child, and what does that mean? So this was kind of, this awareness was rising. Jan Karbaat's clinic near Rotterdam had already been closed down. And then he passed away in 2017. And in the meantime, some of these children, donor-conceived children, had gotten together in a group, and they wanted to get answers. So they actually had a court case to get genetic material from his house, from his hairbrushes, for instance, so that they could test themselves against him to establish if he indeed was their father. And they won that court case.
I mean, that really is a remarkable turn of events. I mean, when all of that came to light, how did those families feel? I mean, firstly, how did the mothers, the women who had gone to these clinics, trusting that they were getting, donations that weren't all from the same man, from the man who was probably shaking their hand at the entrance?
I think women felt desperately betrayed. Some women are very angry about it. And they feel that whether or not medical guidelines were in law, they had a right to be properly, correctly informed about what was going on, and that they didn't want to give birth to children who had scores, hundreds of brothers and sisters, with all of the risks that entails. Also, something as simple as just being able to date in a carefree way.
Just explain why the danger of accidental incest is so real.
It sounds like a theoretical risk, even in a small country, but I spoke to somebody who is a donor-conceived child himself and also has been a donor, and he said that it has happened that after a morning in bed together that two people have realised that they're both donor children and brother and sister.
Oh, gosh.
And he says the Netherlands is quite a small country, it's 18 million, but also many of these clinics worked regionally. So you would have the donors living regionally, you'd have the mothers regionally active. And people who have the same genetics might have the same potential in education, they might have the same inclinations to find certain things fun, they might be in the same sports club, they might be in the same chess club. Even if they go away to university, they might want to study roughly the same subject. So the chances of coming across one another are actually probably bigger than you might think because they're predispositioned to like a certain amount of the same kind of stuff.
That's so interesting. And people are sometimes attracted to people who are just very like them, I suppose.
Yeah, absolutely.
So you said that many of the children had clubbed together to make this court case happen. I mean, how do they feel about all of this?
I think it'd probably be fair to say that people feel confused, let down, betrayed, angry, especially because their parents were going to proper clinics. This is in the Netherlands. This is a well-regulated democratic country which scores high on anti-corruption lists. This doesn't sound like a practice that would score highly on anti-corruption lists.
No. And you started by telling us about Nico, one of the donors who has become a super donor without having had anything to do with it, without having had any say in that. How do those donors feel? I mean, who do they blame?
The donors blame the clinics. And the donors feel very angry at the thought that the clinics might have been making a lot of money from something that, from their perspective, was a donation. And Nico feels he named young Karbat, this fertility doctor. And he said, that's not me. I'm not like that. I'm a good guy.
Not the Karbat was, I don't know how many children. He made of us his own seed. And that is repulsive. But not I. I'm the good guy.
He feels that a wrong has been done to him. They're victims of a kind of theft, dishonesty.
And since these stories came to light and they've caused such shock in the Netherlands, what sort of impact has that had? I mean, have people wanted to change the law or to change the way these clinics work?
Yes, so that's the reason that the new law has come in. But I think that this is a moving story. After the case about Jan Karbat came to light, of course, people started questioning, well, yes, of course, you can have outliers and people who do strange things, but people started to wonder, well, was this just general practice then, what he was doing, donating his own seeds? And indeed, they found a number of other gynecologists who appear to have donated themselves without properly informing the families that that's what they were doing. And this is very much an emerging scandal in the Netherlands. Some of the people involved are calling for a proper independent inquiry. There's an investigation going on into the clinic that Nico used, an official investigation into their practices. This is something we're going to find out more about in the months to come. We're still seeing the consequences of this. So people like Nico, they might know in the abstract that they have a certain number of children, but that becomes a reality when people start getting in touch with them. So he was saying to me that just last week he'd had one of his sons, an Italian son, who'd gotten in touch with him, and this is a new person who he has a relationship with now. And that's not to say that he doesn't welcome them or that he doesn't feel that he has some kind of role as their donor father if they want to have that role with him. That's not at all the case. The weather was very bad when I went to see him. It was raining, it was sunny, a monkey's birthday, we'd call it. And he said in the Netherlands, they call it, zonneschijn, regen, sunshine and rain, that you would use metaphorically, that the rain brings life, the rain brings fertility. It's a mixed emotion that he has as well, because he does feel some kind of bond with these people, even if he didn't want or didn't expect to have 50 children.
Yeah. For people like him, there's clearly, you can only feel sympathy. This is a man whose fate has been determined by other people. For others, like Jonathan Jacob Meyer, who we talked about earlier, it is a deliberate strategy to go out and try and breed an entire new generation of people like you. I mean, it's something we've sort of seen recently with people like Elon Musk, who we're told is, paying women to carry his babies.
Birth rates have been collapsing pretty much worldwide. I do have a lot of kids, and I encourage others to have lots of kids.
There's almost sort of a desire to deliberately shape the future of humanity by somehow trying to create it in your own image. How do you make sense of that?
Well, I suppose we're all doing that, aren't we? If we're having children, I mean, it is an existential urge, isn't it? One thing is sure, we will all die. And to some extent, we will all live on in our genes.
You're right. It is a a primeval urge. It does go back throughout history. I mean, it is estimated that I think 16 million people around the world are direct descendants of Genghis Khan.
Millions of men living in the Central Asian region of the former Mongol Empire have been classified as direct descendants of Khan. In 2003, genetic scientists carried out a case study relating to the descendants of Genghis Khan. By studying Y chromosome data, the scientists were able to calculate a startling figure. Approximately 16 million men share a direct DNA link with Khans. To put it really simply, that's about 1 in every 200 men in the world being related to the Mongol ruler.
In a way, it sort of helps us think about how all of this plays out. Casting ahead into the future, people like Jonathan Jacob Meyer are going to spawn dynasties, whole generations of people who are related to them.
I suppose it's happened since time immemorial, hasn't it? I mean, we were walking along the beach and I was thinking about the Dutch sailors in centuries gone by who went out to sea and spread their wild seed, and maybe they would come back, maybe they wouldn't, maybe their ancestors would come back. Yes, it is a strange thing, but it's also a human urge, isn't it, to pass on your genes? Just maybe not 50 times.
That was Senay Boztas, a journalist in the Netherlands, and you can read her piece on Nico and the ethics of some Dutch fertility clinics at thetimes.com with a subscription. The producer today was Shabnam Grewal, the executive producer was Molly Guinness, and sound design and theme composition were by Mal Lassetto. If you can, do leave us a review wherever you get your podcasts. Thanks for listening. See you again soon.